On numbers 21 through 24, you're just finding the value of x, and in all of these scenarios, the vertex of the angle you're going to be using is outside the circle. So R, H, C, and N are the vertices of the angles we're looking at, and the rule is when your vertex is outside the circle, then your angle is half of the difference of the two arcs that are intercepted. So in number 21's case, when we're finding the angle, the two arcs that are formed by the sides of the angle are S to U and T to U. And we're given both of those arcs. So our x is simply going to be half of the difference of those two arcs. Always the larger number minus the smaller number. So we have 140 minus 74 giving us 66. So we want half of 66 for our value of x. So x is 33. It's not, you don't have to put the degree symbol there because you're just telling the value of x. If you put it on there, that's fine too. Number 22, you're finding the value of x in this angle that's vertex is outside the circle. When you follow the sides of the angle, you go to G and J here, and so one of the arcs is G to J on this side, the other arc is G to J on that side. So together, the two arcs that you're going to be using make up the full circle. You're only given the major arc, GJ, which is 232. So to find the minor arc, you need to first take the 232 from 360. So 360 minus 232 is 128, but that's not our answer. That's just this other arc we need to use to find our value of x. So now we're ready to set up our equation for x. The angle x is half of the difference of the two arcs, 232 minus 128. So 232 minus 128 is 104, and we want half of 104, which is 52. So x is 52. Number 23, finding x, its vertex is outside the circle, so it's half the difference of the two arcs, which we are given the two arcs. QL is 75, MP is 29, so our x is half of 75 minus 29. So 75 minus 29 is 46, so we want half of 46, which is 23. So x is 23. Number 24, you're given the angle this time, and one of your arcs is the missing value you're looking for. So when you're setting up your equation, it's always angle is equal to half of the large arc minus the small arc. So you're going to set up your equation exactly the same way here, except this time you're given the angle. So your angle is equal to 1/2 of the larger arc, which is 108, minus the smaller arc, which is x. So that's one way of setting up your equation. So the first thing I would do is get rid of the fraction by multiplying both sides by 2. So you're going to multiply both sides by 2. By doing so, 2 times 35 is 70, and when you multiply this side by 2, all that happens is that cancels out your fraction. So you're left with 108 minus x. So to get x by itself, you want to subtract the 108 from both sides. You're going to get a negative number here, but that's fine because your x is also negative on the other side. That sign stays with x. So now to get x by itself, you need to understand that negative x is the same thing as negative 1x. So you're going to undo the multiplication between negative 1 and x by dividing both sides by negative 1. So your x value is a positive 38. When you get that answer, you can check it by subtracting 108 minus 38 and getting 70, taking half of that and making sure you get your angle, which is 35 degrees. I wanted to show you an extra problem here because you're going to have a problem similar to this on your test, and it might be a little challenging. So the first thing I notice in this scenario is I'm giving a distinct point here in the middle of the circle, which that means this is the center, which means this segment from here to here is a diameter. And so a diameter goes right straight through the center, which means this arc from here, this endpoint of the diameter, to the other end of the diameter would be a semicircle and has to add up to be 180. This 160 that's out here is only from this endpoint to this endpoint. That's the 160 that we're given. So our unknown is this little bitty arc right here, and we're given the outside angle to be 4 degrees. So we know that the angle is going to be equal to half of this larger arc, which is right here, minus the smaller arc, which is our unknown. But we don't have any representation of this larger arc out here. And so what I need to understand is that the 160 plus the x plus this, what we're trying to find, have to be 180 together. So for just a moment, let's call this unknown y, and we know that the y plus the 160 plus the x have to equal 100, whoops, that's 160, have to equal 180 together. So I've got to have some representation of y without another variable. So if we did that, we would subtract the x and the 160 from both sides to get that y by itself. So we would have y is equal to 180 minus x minus 160. Or you could combine your like terms. 180 minus 160 is 20, so 20 minus x. So that's what I'm going to use for this outside angle because I don't want to introduce another variable. So in other words, to find this angle right here, we could take the sum of these two from 180. So you could write it 100 minus 160 plus x, which is the same thing we get here when you distribute that subtraction, minus 160 minus x. So whichever way makes the most sense for you. So now that we have this arc in terms of x, we're ready to set up our equation. So the angle, which is 4, is equal to half of the larger arc of the two, which is the 20 minus x, minus the smaller of the two arcs, which is your x. Okay, again, don't use the y. You don't want two variables. And so now, to get rid of the fraction, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. So I have 2 times 4, which is 8. Over here, the 2 and the 1/2 cancel. So I have 20 minus x minus x. I can combine my like terms and have 8 equals 20 minus 2x. Subtract the 20 from both sides. Get negative 12, but that's fine because I have a negative 2x on the other side. So when I undo the multiplication by dividing by negative 2, I get x equals 6. So this small arc is 6. Now the most important part of this problem, even though we've solved and found our value of the x, is probably to check it. So that means this smaller arc is 6, and when we put in 6 for x here, 20 minus 6 is 14. So this larger arc is 14. So you want to make sure that when you take 1/2 of 14 minus 6, 1/2 of the larger minus the smaller arc, that you get this angle out here, which is 4. Well, 14 minus 6 is 8, and half of 8 is 4. So that lets you know that your value of x is correct.